So far, we've been using procedural noises and fractals to create the shapes that we get for our terrain and then process them. The other way that I described when we began is that we could actually draw something by ourselves. Now, the main disadvantage of drawing something yourself or sculpting something yourself is that you will end up having to create a lot of detail yourself. So we'll go the hybrid way of creating something that starts off the scene, but then we will process it procedurally so that we're not responsible for adding all the tiny realistic detail. So I think a really cool scenario to try that method with is a volcano. We'll create an iconic volcano, something like Mount Doom, for example. So obviously every volcano starts with a crater. So we will create that with, we just need a simple spherical shape. So we'll create a radial gradient, and let's see that in our large preview you can see it creates a slightly conical structure, not really all that sophisticated, but it will be the perfect starting point. Now what we want to do is create a crater in here. So the simplest way to do that is of course create another radial gradient, and so let's do that. We'll make one more. This one we'll make it smaller, and then we just subtract it. So take the primary input, take the secondary input, and subtract. And now we have this dimple-like formation. Now there's a easier way to do this, and one where we can actually get a few advantages. So let me delete this. We're going to go to the filters and create a ramp. Attach it to the radial gradient, and let's increase the linear ramp frequency. So what this is going to do is create a subrange, and at 2.0 it's an equal subrange. It just basically takes the outside half and inverts it inside. Let's choose keep full height so we get a very large, or rather very tall mountain. Now I think 2.0 may be a little too much for us, so let's do something a little less. I think 1.3 will be very good for our needs. So let's see if this is our little starting point. Now we will offset this with something that we draw ourselves. So let's go to generators, and this time we'll create a layout generator. Now you can just double click this and start drawing anything you want. But here's the thing, I want to make sure that we are drawing in alignment with what we have here. So I'm going to take the terrain input of the layout generator and add it here. So anything we add gets added to the incoming height field. So now if we go to the layout generator, zoom out a little, you'll notice this is our main extents, and inside it is our little starting point mountain. So I'm going to select polygon and try to create something that's a little random. Just gonna click a lot and create a lot of vertices, and these will serve as the basic shape. So now once I'm done, I just right click and it creates this shape. Now obviously this is way too much. So to edit, we just go here, right click our shape, and we'll get options. So let's click edit shape properties, and this window pops up. So here we can control the formation that's generated from this basic outline. So right now the first thing I would like to do is that the fall off is external. It basically extrudes outside, so I want to change it and have it be inside. And here we can see the result of that. I realize this is a very basic geometric shape, but once we start eroding it, it won't matter. Now the other thing I want to do is try to change the fall off distance. Since we're going internal, I have to be a little careful. Having too much makes it go weird. If it were outside, then of course the more you want, the further it goes. So okay, I'll go back to inside and remember to stay this side. I think that's good. And we can also play with just how tall this is. So I think I want to keep it at full height because I want to do a few things here soon. And lastly, let's take a look at the fall off curve. This is always helpful. I think we'll have to stick with the basic, or we could always just try our own. Let's see. Well, this would have potential in a few situations, but I think right now we'll just have to stick to the basics. So I think this is good enough. We'll close this. We can go back to the device view. Now, of course, you can always just disconnect this, have it be a separate shape, and then use a combiner to add the influence that it would bring. So here you can see it's slightly different from before. This would be really cool for a depleted volcano. I'm going to see if we can use the screen blending method and add this. It's a little off. I think what we got by itself would be more useful. So this is actually a cool accident. You can see we get kind of both, but get the cool top part of the ramp if we combine it again. But this has more potential, so I'm gonna delete this. Let's zoom out a little, get this ready. So again, this is our basic shape. So let's get a little bit of bump in here. The easiest way, again, we'll go to a Perlin noise and let's blend the two together. As you can see already, this is starting to look more realistic. I think I want to stick to this side for the average. We can also just go, detail, and just add this as detail, but I don't think that's going to work that well. Not for what we want to do. So I'll just go back to average, and this time we'll stick close to about 15% or just a tad more. Also, we can go and uncheck stabilize noise so we get stronger values here, just a little bit. So anyways, okay, I think we are there to start our first round of erosion. So let's add an erosion node and let's see. This is looking okay, but it's falling down too fast. So here's what I'd like to try. We can go back and do a little bit of terracing like we did with the mountains. So here I'll add a terrace in the middle, and let's see if we can mask this out using just the shape mask of the layout generator. So there, that gives us a little bit. Now the other thing we could try is also use the terrace modulation. So this will modulate the terrace shape based on something. So if we put that here as well, that may be a little too much. I shouldn't have put it there. Let's use the Perlin noise there. Now it's creating a little more let's say broken up pattern as opposed to the systematic thing we were getting. And so when we erode it, it'll become even more eroded. So let's go here and set up our erosion. I think we will definitely need to use a lot of geological time enhancement. This I'm tempted to go with a very high value. You'll notice we're starting to lose our crater up here, but we'll come back to that. The main thing is it needs to have at least the remnants of what was here, and that'll be useful for us. Now, obviously, let's switch from standard to channel erosion because volcanic flows create a lot of channeling, and you'll have deposit upon deposit. So let's have a maximum channel depth and also maximum post-channeling erosion. So that way they kind of like battle each other and give us that lava flow-like look. We also want a little bit of rock hardness, so that will bring back the remnants of that crater that we need to keep. And then finally, a lot of sediment carry. Now, this is damaging the overall shape, but we still need it. So the only way to do it is to mask it out. But we can't risk it at this stage, so I think the prudent thing to do is just keep the sediment carrier amount a little low, or at least try to go as high as we can without destroying our mountain. I think this is safe enough. And then we'll come back to this in a little bit. Now, I think we can also try to see what the filters would do to this. So if we had a simple filter, it's okay, but it makes it lose that cool volcano shape. An inverse filter will destroy the mountain completely. We can try lowering the filter strength, but this is risky. We could also use a combination of these two. Let's see, might be useful because we are getting that cool sediment flow, so that'll be less work afterwards. Now the only problem right now is that this is not tall enough. So I think the simplest way is to use a bias gain filter. Let's go here and let's see if we can increase this. This is good. We get a little bit of that verticality back, and you'll notice our crater is a little lopsided. That's actually a good advantage because volcanoes, when you really look at them up close, while they do have a conical structure often, and they will have a very clean crater on top, the closer you go, you'll notice there is unevenness because it is, after all, a very violent process that creates these land formations. So we will build on top of that by adding very specific erosion, but this time we will do it just on that crater. So now we need a mask for this, and we can always just use a few different procedural tricks with filters to get that, but since we're focusing on the layout side of generation, I think it's best if we went ahead and created a layout. So this will serve as our mask. Now I have it hooked up like we did before. Let's zoom in so we can get around the crater. Now you'll notice there's a lot of blockiness here. And so when you use something like the erosion node, it creates a sort of a memory problem for World Machine. So it'll try to process it, but the edges may become uneven. Now this may not always be the case when you save a tiled output, but just for these views, it can be a little problematic. So just be careful, double check what you're doing, and you'll be fine. So now again, we'll create a polygon. We'll be able to move this around a little in case I make a mistake. So as you'll see, I'm making an uneven shape. So now with this uneven shape, I think we should be okay. I think we can change these things, but I don't really know what effect it will have directly. So I think before we can actually make a decision on that, I'll have to disconnect this. And then let's go back and edit the shape. So this time we can see what it's doing. And this is where the profile curve will help us a lot. I'll have to decrease the fall off distance. And there we have a somewhat round shape that will help us a lot. Now this profile curve helps create a strong mask, but also has decent fall off so that it doesn't look like a stark transition from what we're about to do. Now with this ready and this disconnected, we can safely send this as a mask for the new erosion. So if we go in and start changing the settings, you'll notice only this part gets eroded. So let's do one more thing. I'm going to change this to a mask so I can see it better. And now we can see, oh yeah, this may need to move a little bit. So to do that, we can change this here. But let's see, this may not be the best way to look at it. I think a better way will be if I just lock the preview by pressing F or clicking this button here, and then go back to the layout editor. And now I can move this around and see what kind of a effect this has. This seems to be better. I think I need to scale this down, so I'll right click, select scale shape. I'll make it a little smaller. And now we can move again. And there, I think this should be good. Let's go back. This time we'll use a lot of sediment carry because this time it's going inward. So it helps us. And again, switch to channel erosion so we can get some of that goodness in here as well. Lots of post-channeling erosion as well. And just a tiny bit of rock hardness to get control back. I think a stronger erosion base duration is not going to be good for us because it'll just take everything down too much. We don't want it to be a complete tunnel all the way to the center of the earth or something like that. I'm going to try filtering because I'm not really sure what it will do. But you can see it's not really adding that much, and we can do without it because it's just a small step on the way to the final look that we will try to get. So again, I'm going to unlock, take all of this, and make our second group. Oops, got this guy. So okay, this is our second group on shape refinement. Now finally, this is what I will call our almost ready shape. We're going to take this as our starting point for proper final erosion. So just to recap, we create our basic shape here, and that's just a general boundary shape, as I like to call it. We add a little bit of grit to it by using a noise, and that gives it that slightly more believable look, like this. And then we erode it, and then sometimes erode it again with a mask if needed. And then this gives us a much more believable and a believable shape that doesn't look that much like a hand-drawn thing, but is still following the same boundaries that we set up for it. So now I think we are ready to go and start adding more stuff. So one thing I would like to do is add lots of little rocks or things that can get eroded. So to do that, I'm going to create a Voronoi fractal. I'm going to have a very low scale. Let's try a different style. I think F3, F1 should be very good. And we're going to combine these two. So let's take our erosion. Let's take our Voronoi. Obviously not what we're looking for. What we need is a mask. So I'm going to create a select height mask from our main terrain. And this will be detail. So oops, I meant screen because we want to add on top of it. So let's zoom out a little, see what's happening. And let's lock our preview here, go back to the mask, and change what we're doing. I think this much is good. We need lower fall off. This is altering the shape a little bit, but I think that will be useful, especially if we switch to exponential, because that takes care of that nasty looking transition zone. And at this point you can see it's making our crater look a lot more interesting. Now this is basically a creative call, depends on what you're going for or what you like. You can have smaller bits, or of course you can just have larger ones like we had. You can do 2 iterations, have one like this and have one that's smaller. But I think for this one I do like these. So now I think what we can do is create another erosion node, and this time we will share the mask that we used here and erode using that. So it'll be just this part. If we do that, again have channel erosion. This time we might need to use an inverse filter just to keep things clean. We have too many spiky bits here and that can get nasty. Obviously strong. Whoa, not that strong. Geological time enhancement. A little bit of rock hardness, lots of sediment carry. And of course, channeling depth and post-channeling erosion. Let's see what the strength of the filter can do. See, this can be cool. This, in a way, increases the visual scale of the volcano a little bit, especially if you wanted to have a really like a giant volcano. But of course that's not what we're going for right now, but I'm still going to leave it like this, because one of the things I always recommend is if you're getting too much of an effect on something and lowering it takes away from the shape, then one thing to try is just combine it back with the original. So I'm going to take the original, which is this, and I'm going to take all of this, lower it down here so we know exactly what's going on. So all of this is a secondary effect. This is the primary effect because we'll blend it back with this. So now you get to control how much of this effect you want to keep, and you can even play with the input before combining it back again. So I think just a little less than the original would be good. I'm also thinking we have too much of this Voronoi pattern going here, and this mask may not be the perfect mask for what we're looking for. So I'm going to create a copy of the select height, connect it back to the previous erosion node, and then pass this to the erosion node. Now let's lock preview here, go back and lower this just a little. We can actually use the exponential to our advantage. I'll just unlock the preview so you can see what was happening. Compared to this, our values now go down further on the mountain, so that helps erode the extra parts that were making it look like a systematic pattern. So here's what we have. Perhaps we can have just a tad more. There we go. This takes care of most of the bad shapes we're seeing here. Now we go back here, and this is looking even more believable. And this hasn't been through its final erosion yet. Now we're losing the crater here, and that's bothering me just a little bit. So I think we'll do another bias gain. That's obviously way too much. Let's see, how much of the original shape are we losing? That's something to always keep checking for. So we're not losing that much. We can stay with this. Yeah, I think this works. So now let's go ahead and create that final erosion. One of the advantages of having a bias gain right before erosion is that you get to have an additional level of control. If the erosion whittles down the terrain too much, you can just add a little bit of gain and lower the bias a little, and the terrain will become a little blockier, so you can erode it a lot and not have to worry about losing everything. So let's see, again start geological time enhancement, although maybe this time we can skip that and just have a very long base duration. So we have this, again, channeled erosion and lots of sediment carry, or well, maybe not that much. We'll definitely need to have strong rock hardness, otherwise we will lose a lot of the detail here. And then let's try the inverse filter. No, that's actually destroying a lot of our detail. So it makes it look like a common mountain, and that's definitely not what a volcano should look like. A simple filter might be better, but I think we can get away without using a filter, or at least let's go with a simple filter and have a very low amount, because I think otherwise we'll get a lot of sharp details here that we probably want to avoid. Let's increase the channel depth. I think we don't need to go to maximum. About 0.8 is good. Some post-channeling erosion, but not too much. This is looking decent. Now our crater has gotten a little bit bigger than we originally wanted. So one thing we can easily do is just go all the way back and change this. So I'm going to lock the erosion right here, go back, and let's experience the joy of procedural design, where you can go back, change things in a non-destructive way, and it will work. Now lowering this didn't work as much as I had hoped, so let's go up a little. 1.6 is actually working out better for us, so let's try that. Now the other thing is, this is the place where we drew the mask for the crater erosion, and if I unlock the preview, go back here, this is where we created a very large hole. So now we can actually go and change it a little. So I'll lock the preview to the final position and then move this around. Let's see. Is it better here? Is it better here? Maybe this still needs to be scaled down a little. That actually helps create a much better looking crater. It's very iconic. So now let's go back out here, take a look. I think this is cool. So let's add a couple of final finishing touches. Now before we erode this, I think I'm going to try for another terrace. I'll show you why I would like to do that. Obviously we don't want it everywhere, so we'll mask it. So lock this here, and let's just go for about this much. Lower the fall off, make it exponential again, and in the terraces I think we should go for about 15 terraces and lots of terrace layering, like lots of little sub layers. Also the shape, let's pull it outward, something like this. And now when we erode it, we get a lot of these things. I think we can make it more uneven by modulating the terrace using the incoming height field itself. Just adds a slight unevenness, as you'll notice. Like these aren't systematically the same height. If you wanted to do the opposite, you can always just add invert node. So to invert this, hey, that's not bad either. But let's see. I think this works. We get this intense layering here, and then a lot of strong erosion right here. I think we're ready. Now let's try and do one final small thing. Let's add thermal weathering, because it's a volcano, so you have to have heat fused rock, and this device is going to add that final look that we need before we go and start coloring this a little. So again, let's use the two-phase like we did with the mountains, and we'll use low iterations. We don't need to lose too much detail. Let's play with the mass balance to see which way we would like it to be. I think a little sharper is better, so we'll stay around 0.25. And then the rock angle, I think we should keep it at near maximum. So 0.16 should be enough. And finally the talus angle. Well, it's not making too much of a difference apart from just these small bits, but I usually like a high value for this, so we'll keep it here. And maybe try a few more iterations. Or a few fewer iterations. I think we had the sweet spot with 10, so I'll go back to that. I think this is where we're more or less ready, so let's build this. You'll notice this was a slightly time-consuming build even at 2K, so with such a complex structure and a complex graph, it will take a long time to generate at higher resolutions. So now that this is ready, let's remove this window. Let's take a proper look at this in this view. So this is good. Now we have this massive volcano that's spewing lava, and it's not your typical just simple cone. It's more realistic. This is what real volcanoes tend to look like often. And this has a very giant blast crater, so you can have a lot of fun playing with that. Now, let's top this off by adding a little bit of color to this. And that's always fun with volcanoes because we can get some cool lava flow thing going on. So I'm going to add, as we did before, I'm going to add an overlay view so we can see the output. And we will have to create a slightly more complex map than before because we can't just take the flow map and apply it here. Let's get that secondary window back. So this works to a certain degree, but not as much as we'd like, and this doesn't look right for lava. So again, let's go and add a colorizer so we can see the colors properly. So this is the flow map. This is how it's happening. And I think we need to mask it out a little. This is a technique called blending with null. And the way you do it is you create a combiner and you create a constant value, which is just a height field at whatever height you want it to be, but we need to make it 0. Now, this is how the combiner works. You put it together and then the mask is what will control the output. So what I want is just this top part to have these flow lines. So to do that, I'm going to go and grab the select height and put it as a mask to the combiner. I'll lock it here and let's see, let's just go to the top, remove the bottom, and I'll invert selection. And I think I made a small mistake where I had to go. Average should always be at 100%, otherwise you get a bad blend. Forgot to do that. So now go back to the select height. Now I can control where the lines are going. I'll switch to exponential, or actually in this case we'll need to stick with linear. And I think this should be okay, at least for the simple use that we're going to have right now. This time we need to go to the colorizer and let's create something. So all of this, let's just leave it black. This, let's make it red here. We'll add another one, it's orange, and then finally a brighter yellow. That looks kind of cool. So if we're going to do that, I think we need to blur this out just a little bit. So for that, we are going to create a blur device, set it to about 2 pixels Gaussian. That looks good. The final thing we'll do is, so let's try an equalizer. See, that's a little too much. We'll control it just a bit. Let me go here. Okay, that's a lot of cool lava, but that's probably too much. Again, lower a little more. And let's try looking at it here. That looks cool. So we kind of have a lava mask. Obviously we need something for the terrain itself. So let's create just a simple Berlin noise, and I'm going to create another colorizer. This one, let's create some normal brown tones. Just want to stick to slightly desaturated natural looking colors. And by natural looking, we're going to stick to some generic browns. You may want to play more with it on your own, take samples from pictures. That's always a really great way. So I think this should be enough. I think this white one, we need to get rid of that, so just click and drag it down until it turns red and let go. This is good. We can change it a little more by changing the fractal we are using. And we can also change it by adjusting the scale. I think this is good. Now let's combine these two. So we're going to take this and add this on top. We're not going to average, we're going to use add. And there you have your volcano with lots of little lava flows. Now obviously you can mask these out using a layout device like we've been using for the crater, and that way you can choose where you want these flow lines to show up.